Every single part of you serves a purpose, and every single part of you deserves to be heard. When we go through life, there are times where our psyche splits off into different parts of who we are, who we must become, or who we used to be. And when we don't integrate those parts of ourselves, when we leave those parts in the dark and we don't learn from them, we don't listen to them, then we find ourselves trying to man our ship. And each of the crew members is running up, grabbing the wheel, and steering it a different direction until we try to grab hold again and we go, oh, I don't know why that happened. I don't know where I was going with that. I don't know why that took over. But when we listen to those parts, when we honor those parts, when we learn to respect each individual part of our psyche and hear what it has to say, hear what purpose it is serving for us, we learn to be the captain of our own ship and to listen to our crew members and what they need from us. But we have the wheel in our hands. We have to learn to listen to the wounded child in us, to the angry protector in us, to the addict in us who's looking for relief. We have to listen to them, respect them, welcome them in. Then they don't need to fight so hard to be heard. I want to start with an idea from Ram Dass. Ram Dass was somebody who spent decades and decades and decades doing every spiritual practice imaginable, learning every lineage, Tibetan Buddhism, meditating for 20 hours a day and sleeping for 3, getting up and meditating again, right? And he always said, no matter how long I meditated, no matter how many spiritual practices I did, I never once was able to escape a single one of my neuroses. Not one of them went away. And he describes the process of learning to integrate those things as learning to invite those parts of ourselves in for tea, right? To embrace them, to hear what they have to say, to work with them, because those parts of our psyche aren't there to harm us. They are there to keep us going and to keep us alive, right? Even the most self-destructive people among us, right? I was a very, very self-destructive person. I've met a lot of very destructive and self-destructive people. No one has truly bad intentions, right? Even the people I've met who have done me the most harm in my life or truly abused me and things like that, in talking to them, as they've grown into a person who is less, corroded by their own trauma or less absorbed in themselves. Hearing why they did those things or what place they were coming from, it's never truly of a bad intention. Even people who feel like they get joy out of your suffering, they don't truly. They just have parts of themselves that are so rejected and so suppressed and they need to push them away so violently that when that self needs to be heard, it rears its head in a really ugly way. It forces its way in because we're pushing it away so hard. And that's why some of the most abusive people in the world are some of the most hurt, are some of the people who are suffering the most among us. It is, there's an idea from I'm gonna butcher his name. Thick hot non. I don't know what the word is in that lineage, but I guess in India they'd call him a saint or something like that. But he's a spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism, and he always said the people who are the most awful, the people who do the most horrible things, don't need hatred and judgment. They need help. And they need help because the people who are causing all the suffering are the people whose suffering is overflowing out of their body. And in order to compensate for that, they do horrible things. And obviously, that's not a justification for that. 100% not. But what this talk is really about is a way to mitigate those things, a way to discuss how we can meet ourselves more deeply, more honestly, and really acknowledge what's going on within us so that we don't have to cause suffering to other people. So there's not a part of our psyche that's so rejected and feels so unlovable that it needs to grab the wheel and yank it this way. And that's where we go wrong, and that's where we hurt people, and that's where we hurt ourselves. And the first part to me is understanding why does our psyche, split like that. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a psychology degree or anything like that, but I think there's, at least in my own life, in my own experience, I see that throughout our lives we go through experiences, and every time we come up against a challenge, or a traumatic event, even something that is beautiful and amazing, our body is really, really good at adapting. It adapts for survival, right? So if we feel something extremely relieving or awesome or comfortable, it's like, okay, that's good. I want to hold on to that. Or if we experience something horrifically traumatic, and we've learned, okay, expressing myself in this way leads to danger and pain and harm. So I'm going to cut that part off and get rid of it and put it as far back as I can. It doesn't exist to me anymore, right? In order to survive. Our body is really good. Our body is super intelligent, and I think we don't give our bodies enough credit for actually being good at what they do, right? Our body is wired to help us survive, help us keep moving forward, help us do what we need to do to live our lives, to survive, to keep going. And especially, in my case, I was someone who experienced a lot of abuse and pretty intense trauma very early in my life, right? My kind of core memory of launching that is like at I thought my whole life it was at like I was like 7 or something, but my mom, and talking about it, my mom was like, "You were 3 years old." So I'm like, "Whoa, shit!" So at 3 years old, right? If I'm going through something horrible, and that involves like a threat to my life, and what my body does is go, okay, if I express authentically, if I stay in this state, I might die, right? That's what your body thinks. I might die. It's life or death, right? You don't know what's going on, especially if you're a child, right? So it cuts off, it severs that part of the psyche, and it pushes it over there, right? To survive, to keep going. I can't exist in that way, or I will die. You go over there, right? And not just through trauma, but that happens in a billion different ways, right? We learn how to survive socially. We learn how to survive physically, emotionally, spiritually. And all those times we kind of split off these parts of our psyche, because each part of our psyche is our body trying to get something done. Not trying to get something done, but I could be trying to get something done, but trying to give us something, trying to support us in some way. I've had a real journey in my own life, um, learning about really meeting myself and learning about those parts of my psyche, right? And it's a weird journey, because you live your life a certain way for however many years. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you could be 50, you could be 40, you could be 30, 20, it doesn't matter, right? I'm 26, and I would say until I had like a really intense trauma regression to 24 and was like, oh my God, wait, that's what's going on underneath the surface. And I could see it clearly. But like the first, 24, 25 years of my life, it's like I knew myself to be one way, right? I remember always saying, I don't know, I just like live in extremes or something, because I would just have such intense emotions, right? Like either positive or negative. It was always the most extreme version of those things. And part of that is my personality, psyche, whatever. But also part of it is not understanding what all those parts of my psyche are doing. And now I'm finally starting to learn that accepting and acknowledging the parts of yourself is the path to change, is the path to finding inner peace and inner stability within yourself and security, because you're starting to really know yourself and not trying to reach for being something, or I don't like this about myself and I want to be something different, and I'm going to choose to be this instead, right? Because when those parts of our psyche feel heard, when they feel heard, that is when they relax. If I have a part of myself that's going, "Hey, don't do this, like it's really dangerous. I'm really scared." And I'm like, "No, like I'm not going to be I'm not going to be scared. Shut up." Like, and obviously this is happening subconsciously, but you're suppressing that feeling going, "Oh, like I don't want to feel that. I'm going to like kind of escape in this way or just oh, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm going to self-sabotage something like that," right? When it's not heard, it grabs the wheel because you're not giving it the space to be heard. It demands to be heard. It's grabbing the wheel of your system and saying, "Listen to me, you motherfucker." All right? And it jams it one way, right? It becomes a rebel because it has to be because you're not letting it in. And the examples to me of what these parts of the psyche can look like, for me, because I can only use examples from myself, but the parts of the psyche of my psyche I've had to learn to explore and accept have been the wounded child in me, right? The part of me that is in pain, right? And that kid part of me that I had to push away because it was too painful to go through at the time when I was a child, those things, right? And I understand now. I spent so much of my life trying to like heal that kid and being like, "Oh, like, if I do enough inner work and healing, like I'm not going to feel that anymore." And I realized that I was misguided in thinking that, or I just didn't understand yet. But now I see that that part of me is never going to go away. That part of me is there. It's in my system. There's a part of my inner child that is almost cannot be seen without half of it being enveloped in pain. Like pain was such a deep familiar part of my experience as a young child. Like my experience as a creature on this planet was instantly kind of filled with pain as much as it was beauty and joy and love, right? And so the goal hasn't become to take that away from him. The goal has been to let him be who he is, you know? And rather than push that kid away who just needs to cry, right? I couldn't cry most of my life. Like the only times I could cry were in deep, deep moments of frustration. Like I had to be pushed to the edge, like repeatedly, like nonstop, and then I just break. But nowadays, I'm happy to say that I've healed enough to where I can feel more comfortable crying just to myself, right? I can feel more comfortable expressing that pain and things like that. But the reason that I can now, the reason it's possible is because I really acknowledged finally and allowed that kid to just be in pain. I I had compassion for that part of myself. I had compassion for that part of my psyche and I listened to him. Finally, instead of just saying I don't want to hear that cuz I don't want to deal with it. I listened to him. And my example of integrating that wounded child in me is now I'll just go through my life. And I mean, the other day I was scrolling through Instagram, and this ridiculous video came up, and I just read comments sometimes because they're kind of funny sometimes, and I just see this person just comments, "My dad bullied me a lot more than anyone else did," or something like that, and it's such an interesting experience to talk about. It's like I feel the kid just coming up, just welling up, like feeling that experience wanting to be expressed again. And I've learned to just allow it. And I let that kid cry through my eyes of the pain that he felt, like the rejection or the feeling of not being lovable or not being enough or things like that. And I just rub my chest and I cry and I hold him, right? And then I feel like I can hold that child and comfort him now, you know, instead of pushing him away. And then there's the part of me that had anger issues for most of my life. I've always, like I said, extreme kind of mood swings. I had real anger issues. And so much of the time I looked at my anger as this demon. Like, I mean, I definitely have said a bunch of things I wish I didn't say, or kind of blown up in ways I wish I didn't, but, I never, like, it never got, like, extreme abuse or something like that. I was never, like, some psycho, but, just getting angry at small things that don't fucking matter, right, basically. And I used to look at this as, like, I hated that part of myself. I didn't want that part of myself to exist, but in doing this work, I see that part of myself. But as soon as I listened to it, well, I mean, when I went through that trauma regression, I naturally became a lot less angry because part of that self was there to express the pain that that kid was feeling, right? I realized that my angry self was the ultimate protector of that child. That's why he existed. That angry guy that existed within me was angry because that wounded child wasn't being heard and was never treated with love and respect in that way. And he was angry. He was angry at me. He was really angry at me. And I look at that guy, when I get angry now, I mean, I express anger I think a lot more healthily, but when I listen to that angry part of myself, when I get angry, I mean, it's like I wanted to say after the trauma regression, it died down, right? I had much more of a calm presence in a lot of ways, and I still get angry. Everyone does. It's a human emotion, and you shouldn't try to not, right? But that died down because I finally heard that wounded child. I finally listened to that part of my psyche. I finally looked at him with compassion and wanted to be there for him. And in doing so, that other part of my psyche didn't need to grab the wheel so much because he didn't need to go, "You asshole, you're not fucking listening to this kid. This kid needs you to support him. This kid needs you to listen to him. He deserves to be heard." Right. And now when I get angry, I find myself soothing the protector. I see that angry part of myself as he's my ultimate protector. My body created that part of my psyche to protect me. You know, my body is expressing this part of myself that was created because I was put through pain. And then it created a part of my psyche to protect that pain or to protect that kid who's in pain, And it's interesting when you look at it like that. And when you think about your own parts of your psyche, right? What's there? What are the parts of yourself like? And I always like to think of work like this, shadow work, I guess you could call it, is think about it like there's breadcrumbs all throughout your life. There's the moments where you react way stronger than you should. I don't want to say should. That's a stupid word. Where you react way stronger than you feel is warranted sometimes, right? And you go, "Okay, why is that like a trigger for me? Why is that so upsetting to me?" And I think we have a problem in our culture, which is I think that a lot of people kind of now, like, there's kind of like weird kind of buzzword spirituality and like buzzword, you know, therapy language and things like that, where it's like people talk about triggers and stuff, but then that just becomes an adopted part of someone's identity. And then they just go, "Oh, well, this is who I am. I have these triggers and that's just the way it is. And I just feel this way when this thing happens." And it's like, that's not the point of identifying triggers. The point of identifying triggers isn't to like lean into it and become a martyr of like, yeah, like, oh, I'm a victim. And it's just a way to kind of fuel your ego's sense of self-importance. And it's like your triggers are there to teach you, not to adopt them as part of who you are. It's to teach you. They're breadcrumbs, right? If I get triggered by something, I'm like, "Oh my god," like I had a fucking intense reaction to that. That's a thing to now investigate. Okay, what's that about? What is that part of myself asking of me? Right? And one of the parts of myself I want to, vulnerably talk about here, because I think a lot of people struggle with this too, and I think it doesn't get talked about a lot. But there the one of the parts of my psyche I'm exploring right now is the addict, right? This sexual addict. I think that I've experienced a lot of hypersexuality in my life, right? I've always just been a hypersexual person, and obviously coming from a traumatic background, it's like I can look at it even on the surface, go, okay, well, clearly, everyone has their vices. Some people go to drugs, some people go to alcohol, some people go to gambling, some people go to cigarettes, some people go to this, some people go to that. I went to sexuality. So in my I've explored this a lot, but I think in the way that I'm talking about, I haven't explored it enough. And that's what I'm going through currently in my journey, right? Trying to listen to what that guy wants, what that part of myself is asking for when I feel like a craving hits that I just like, oh, I can't focus on anything else. Like I just need to satisfy my craving. And like that part of myself takes the wheel, right? And I really want to learn about him, and in the amount that I've been asking, what are you asking for? I see myself as a teenager, a middle schooler, right? Discovering sexuality and like finding this thing that was just this dopamine rush, this spike of good feeling. And as somebody who lived in this kind of inner turmoil, chaos, instability state my whole life, this disconnection from myself, that was like relief, that was a reprieve, that was an escape, really. And so I listened to this part of myself and it's like, what do you need? And I hear relief, I hear comfort, I hear, right now, I mean, I went through a bad breakup. Some of you may know, I feel like I talk about it a lot because it's pretty relevant in my journey. But um, now that I'm a single person, and I I'm not a sex addict in the sense of like I just want to go have a bunch of casual sex. That's not the type of person I am, right? But I think there is a thing of, well, for me, I want to stay celibate until I meet somebody who's emotionally safe for me in terms of my own healing journey. I think that's important for me to save my intimacy for somebody who's safe to express that part of myself too. But in doing that, I spend a lot of time by myself, and uh, there's also that part of me that is craving that feeling of connection that I've kind of relied on my whole life in relationships. I've always relied on relationships and women to be the thing that is keeping me from that trauma just taking over my body. It keeps me focused on something else, or just earning love or things like that have been super unhealthy. But now that I've moved away from that and healed from that, I feel that part of myself craving that connection feeling, still craving an escape from possible loneliness, even though I don't feel lonely consciously. It's like there's something there that's keeping something. It's part of my body that believes that I won't be okay without it, because since I became a sexual being, I've relied on it my entire life, and that's something I'm exploring. That's something I'm interested in exploring. But those are the examples in my own life. But in your life, the most important thing I want to leave you with is that I've learned through my own journey and spending most of my life trying to change and trying to get rid of those parts of myself and heal them and feel different. That is not the aim you need to be aiming for. That is a wrong idea. It is really learning to look at the parts of yourself that you don't like, that you think don't deserve love, that you think don't deserve attention, right? Those things you just want to get rid of, you want to change. Turn inward, turn towards them, look at them with compassion, open to them, say, what do you want to tell me? And you'll see so quickly they have something to say. They have something important to say. They are serving a purpose in your body. They're trying to do something for you. They're trying to help you. They're trying to make you feel better. They're working off of ideas that have been built into your body of how to keep you happy and safe and comfortable. And sometimes those parts of ourselves that are trying to keep us happy and safe and comfortable are also destroying us. And that's why we need to teach those parts of ourselves that they don't need to be so scared. They don't need to be fighting so hard, but we have to have the courage to face them because some of those parts of ourselves are in a lot of pain. And it's scary to face a part of ourselves that's in a lot of pain. But that is the way that change comes. That's the way that peace comes. That's the way that joy comes, is when you can become the captain of the ship. It's when you become the captain of the ship. And that's a hard process. Walking through those fires can be a hard process. Facing those demons can be a hard process. And, if you're scared of going through that process, if you don't know how to get through it, if you're going through it right now and you don't know what to do about that, click on this video because I just did a video about this, talking about how hard that journey can be and what we can do to get in touch with the part of ourselves that is untouched by that fire, part of ourselves that we can always come back to. The fire isn't us. The fire is just something we go through to find peace and joy in our lives. And I wish you peace, and I wish you joy, and I wish you love. I'm going to say namaste and have a beautiful day.